Welcome to the Connected Life Book Club podcast with Summer Shepherd.
That's me.
And Nikki Corbin.
Hey, hey.
Welcome to your place to connect with a good book, with God, and with each other. The Connected Life Book Club podcast.
Hey, it's Summer and Nikki. I can't believe we're already on week 5.
I know.
Of season 5 of the Connected Life Book Club. We're going through Lost Women of the Bible by Carolyn Custis James. This week, chapters 7 and 8, that would be Esther and Mary, the mother of Jesus, this week.
So good.
So, goodness gracious. Talk about 2 heavy hitters. My goodness. So I do want to jump in here. Now, I've got to say, I was surprised on the Esther chapter, Nikki, and I'll say why. But how did you feel about these 2 chapters? This one in particular.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. So Esther, after I got over my sort of comparisons, I was super surprised. I've always thought of Esther as like this amazing figure. And so to dive into like some of the flaws, like, oh wait, actually, she kind of was letting her beauty take the lead, and I actually highlighted the thing where it said where is it? She decided to play the game. And like the game of culture, like and then following up with all the things that meant was like, oh girl.
No, it's so funny that you said that, because that's exactly my thoughts. But it's so funny to compare this chapter with Tamar. Because Tamar, I'm like, oh, biblical villain for sure. And then they're like, no. She was this wonderful hero.
Righteous.
She did all of these things right.
Yeah.
Total role model. And I'm like, okay. And then we come to Esther and I'm like, oh, total role model. And they're like, actually, I felt like a little offended from a girl. I'm like, yo, step off, Esther. Okay. Because, they talk about how she let herself just be swept along by her beauty. And she was totally, they didn't call her out for being like impure with the king, but I mean, like she was, or whoever, Xerxes, that she kind of just let herself have a one-night stand, which is always one of those things that they skate around in the pulpit. I get it. Like, do we all understand? Do we all accept that, like, what she did that night to please the king? Like, she didn't read to him.
No,
she didn't give him a back massage.
Yeah.
No, none of that. Okay, yeah, let's call it what it is without calling it what it is, because that would be uncomfortable. So, right. So, like, she had a one-night stand with this dude, and she obviously knew what she was doing. Like, I mean, he's just like, ooh, you the best. And so made her his queen. But like, I don't think I ever held that against her.
No.
Because I mean, I felt like she was a victim of her circumstance. Like, it was kind of one of those things. I was willing to offer her grace because of cultural differences, where I was slower to offer that to Tamar, but I feel like the author handled that the opposite way. And that was surprising to me.
Oh, it just it kind of blew my mind. I wasn't ready for it. But I mean, it's true. And I think that the difference here is that I think that she was doing what she felt like she needed to do, but that was based on culturally what it was. And that was just the motive. Like, she just wanted to live, and she wanted to, she was saying she enjoyed all the luxuries and things like that. There was no, dare I say, pure motive, like Tamar was trying to save the line of Judah, and that was all part of God's plan. But this, I mean, ultimately, Esther and all that happened too was part of God's plan to place her in that position of power. So, I mean, on the one hand, I am like, girl, but then on the other hand, I'm like, I don't know.
Well, and okay, that's where I feel like, I don't know. The author gave a lot of grace to Tamar, and I understand it. Was Tamar's pure motivation, I need to honor the Lord and extend Judah's line? Or was it, if I don't keep my union with this family and I don't have a son by Judah's son, et cetera, like, I'm ruined. Like, this is my lifeline that God used to ultimately accomplish his purposes. You know, I don't know that Tamar's motives were totally like, I just really need to honor God in this, so I'm going to seduce my father-in-law. Like, I don't know. Like, and I feel like I show a lot more, you know, honestly. So like, I show more grace to her having read this chapter. Now, Esther, I don't know that it was that different. Like, yeah, she did what she needed to do to survive. She was looking out for number one, but God used her in the circumstance in a way that, like, the Jews would have been wiped out had she not been there. So kind of like Joseph, you know, like he was sold into Egypt. He was put into this position of power, you know, for such a time as this. And that's kind of Esther's whole thing. But I do appreciate the line where she said, he made Esther beautiful, but this gift, like any other, came with responsibility to use it as a faithful steward in ways that honored him and promoted his kingdom. And I think that's where it came down, is she was happy to be the queen without necessarily turning it to see how can I honor God with my position until that change, like until that transition, which they talk about. So, okay, so starting with question 1 on our discussion guide then, Nikki.
Yeah.
When did God call you out of your comfort zone, which, you know, Esther was sitting pretty, in order to get you on his mission?
Okay, so I am a little bit opposite of Esther. So I referenced like earlier that, you know, I had to get past my like comparisons here, because I too have found myself really wrapped up in like cultural ideas of ideals, you know, and beauty and stuff. But it has been like debilitating in the other sense, where it's like, I just always feel like I never, you know, measure up. And so knowing that is a huge insecurity for me, God actually placed me in a position in media. For one, I'm cool behind a microphone, like super cool behind a mic. But then along with that is like, I don't know, talking in front of thousands of people in front of a concert, or being recognized on the street, or, you know, being very visible on like things like social media and such. And that is so out of my comfort zone. I would much rather like be behind a rock or under it, you know, just all of it. And so, but the idea is, I know that I am placed here. I know I'm here for a purpose. And so that is part of the growing that I need to do in order to help accomplish his mission, because that's what I'm supposed to do. But boy, is he's still working on me with that, let's just say.
It's so interesting, because when I was younger, I not that I was like Esther, like, I mean, I don't think I would have won any king's favor, but I was an actress, like, and I was used to being up in front of people, and I enjoyed when people found me attractive and stuff. You know, this is all before I became a Christian. That was kind of where I found that comfort. I really cared what people thought in every way. I was a people pleaser. I still am. Like, I struggle with that. You know, I'm a words of affirmation girl as far as my love language is concerned. And so people thinking that I am doing a good job or living a good life, it matters to me more than I wish it did.
Yeah.
Where I feel like God called me out of my comfort zone then is when he gave me what I feel is my life mission. Like, I feel like everything I do in radio, etc., is to let people know that they are loved and that they are not alone. But the way that I do that is by really owning my own mess and being transparent and being honest. And some of the hardest things for me to share, things like, you know, errors I've made in parenting, times I've screwed up, you know, sharing my testimony for a long time was really hard for me because I wanted to impress all of these, you know, Christian leaders that I was surrounded by. And, you know, my story of drug, sex, and rock and roll wasn't going to impress anybody. But I felt like the Lord was putting it on me to be honest. And what I've seen come from that willingness to be bold and to tell the truth is people who then felt free to be bold and tell the truth, and realizing just how much we had in common. And so I have, you know, another podcast called No Seriously, How Do I Do This? Which I've been dedicated to letting people know, you know what, when it comes to parenting, none of us really know what we're doing. But that kind of honesty was hard one for me because I spent my whole life trying to fabricate a version of myself that won approval.
Yeah.
And but that was my mission, was to be the exact opposite. So that definitely rocked me.
Wow.
And going through this chapter, I think it really shines a light on just how fragile the foundation was on which Esther based her purpose. Like,
Oh, yeah.
so many people base their purpose on their looks, on what they can offer society that way. But I don't know if there's anything more fleeting.
Yeah.
And so just reading this chapter just helped you really understand. And one thing I do appreciate, it talks about how Esther's given name was Hadassah. That was her Jewish name. And I highlighted where it said Hadassah was the first part of Esther that got lost. She traded in her cultural identity. Yep. She traded in the values of her people in order to conform and survive. Like, who knows what would have happened to Esther had she, not gone with the flow.
Right.
But she chose that. She chose to kind of sell out, if you will, was very successful in that, and ultimately was used by God. But I appreciate that it wasn't just pointing to her weakness, but it pointed to the struggle. She goes, the forces behind her choices were complex, a mix of culture, youthfulness, Mordecai's counsel, fierce pressure, and the state of her own heart. And this was a young girl. Like, I don't know that I would have chosen anything different. Honestly, if I looked like Esther, I probably would have made the same choice.
At that age?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And with that position of power within your grasp, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would have done it differently.
Right. Yeah. So some of the things that really resonated with me too, just talking about that history of like insecurity and such, which is actually, that's a big part of my testimony with, finding worth and outside of like cultural expectations and standards and such. But that's besides the point. I actually really resonated. It says she lost her way when she accepted the culture's view that beauty was all she had to offer.
Yes.
And then she lost her true identity when she made beauty her business. And I just think that was such a moment for me reading this chapter, because that's very, very true. A lot. We are bombarded day after day after day with the ideals. You should look this way. You should have this thing. You don't have enough of this thing, or you have too many of these, like wrinkles or rolls or whatever it is you want to say. And so like, it was just this really great moment of like, no. God created you, what you are right now. Love your body, take care of your heart, take care of your soul, take care of your mind. But don't think that, your outward appearance is the only thing you have to offer. In fact, like you said, it's so fleeting. If that is all you think you have to offer the world, boy, I don't know. There's so much more to each person that let's not get lost in that being pretty. I like that thing. Have you ever heard, like, we're so consumed with being pretty. How about we be pretty smart and pretty kind and, pretty patient and compassionate and, all the right things. So anyway, that's my tangent, because that was one of the big things for me in this chapter, actually.
You know what? I want to take an aside for a moment, Nikki, and I just want to say, like, I know that insecurity and struggle over looks and stuff is something that you had battled, but I just want to, I just want to take a minute and just want to affirm, like, you are one of the most beautiful women that I know. And I don't just mean like, no. I don't even just mean in your heart. I don't even just mean on the inside. Like, you are absolutely stunning. And I'm not just trying to blow smoke, but I think that you really resonate and like exemplify that point that even the most beautiful women don't see themselves that way, because we put so much emphasis on our looks. Even when we have them, we don't appreciate them, and I feel like it's always something we're chasing, and it's so fleeting because what we have is never good enough. And then what we do have, if it's good enough, won't last. But Nikki, it blows my mind that you struggle with that. But I think that is but that is the point, right? Those that we see as the most beautiful are often the most insecure, because that is not enough on which to base our foundation, because it'll never be good enough.
Right. There's so much truth there. So much truth.
But I feel like sometimes in culture, tell me if you feel this way. We look at the girls who are very pretty, and we sometimes sell them short because there's, I don't know, maybe a jealousy in us, et cetera, that we assume that their prettiness is who they are and what they have to offer. And I appreciated that when we talk about, it's more important to be pretty smart and pretty kind and all of that. Like, it's okay to be pretty. And I think sometimes we don't hear that. Like, it is okay to be gorgeous. And Esther was. And in this chapter, it says the culture wanted her to be beautiful and compliant. God made her beautiful. Like, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But he didn't create her for passivity or to satisfy the selfish pleasures of men. Passivities won't take God's image bearer far. Yes, she was gifted with beauty, but even that valid gift was not all that she had to offer. It said God wanted more from Esther. He actually put her in a position that compelled her to become a bold, courageous adventurer and do some rescuing of her own, which was sometimes pretty women are the bigger victims. And I feel like, I don't know, maybe that's a weird thought to have, but girls who maybe aren't as outwardly blessed are kind of forced to find that grit where society doesn't push the pretty girls in that same way because I don't know, that's what I've seen at least.
Well, and I also think, on the same line, I do think that there has been, and I think it's starting to change. At least I really hope it's starting to change. But I think that we've been taught essentially to be pitted against each other in this. Like, beauty is a competition, and and then culture sets the standard. So if we don't meet that cultural standard, then we're automatically jealous and fighting against the girls that are beautiful. So we're gonna have bad feelings towards them, or because or they're just going to make us feel bad in a way because we're not measuring up to them. It's really tough, but I do see that, I hope, turning a lot of that body positivity movement and just this like celebrating of the uniqueness. And so I just hope that we can get past all of that and see who we really are in Jesus and how, we couldn't be all the same. It wouldn't make sense for the world to have everyone be the same, and it would be boring if we all looked the same and acted the same. And so that's why God made us all unique, so that we could all work together, so that we could all be here to be, kind of Azers to each other and to be image bearers for him. And, whether you have a big nose or short legs or whatever it might be, we're all made for him.
And I think that's another area that we just keep getting it wrong, and we're trying, and hopefully that pendulum swings more toward the middle. But, you go so far one direction and valuing those perfect proportions and symmetrical faces, but then you swing so far to the other direction, trying to be body positive, that you almost villainize those that are traditionally beautiful.
Yes.
And so like, when can we just get over it and just focus on something else, like in one way or another?
Let me see your heart. Let me see your heart. That's what I want. Anyway.
And now what Esther faced, I don't know that any of us can truly understand what was at stake for her.
Yeah.
Because we don't live in a day and age where, if we talk wrongly to our husbands, like, it could be off with your head in a totally legal way. And maybe, there's people in an abusive marriage, but I just mean the fact that she was married to the king did not in any way really protect her. If anything, like, the stakes were higher.
Yeah.
And so when she is faced with the reality that's either my people get exterminated, including me, or I have to face the man I married, there was a hesitation. Like, it's genocide or having to stand up to my husband. But the fact that she had to think about it was, that shows you what kind of world she was living in. But what one of my favorite lines is, when you do face difficult circumstances, that's where this kind of stuck out to me. Those difficult circumstances she was in. But instead of destroying Esther's life or getting her in trouble, the crisis, it shook her awake and proved to be the making of her. Without that difficult choice, without being faced with something unthinkable, Esther would not have become the woman that God made her to be.
Yeah.
And we spend a lot of time hating the trouble we find ourselves in. And yet that very trouble could be the thing that saves us.
So this is a total side note, but I had just read a story about these two young boys. They were with their mom at the store, and they had these glow sticks. And the little baby was like crying for one. And so the mom gave him one to quiet him down. And the older boy took it from him. And of course, the baby was like freaking out, just crying like crazy. And the boy cracked it. And it started to glow, And at first, though, the baby was like, oh my gosh, you broke it, kind of a situation. And then it glowed. And the comparison, of course, is that of the things that we go through, that sometimes God does need to bring us through some hard things so that we can be molded and refined, and then we can grow. Like, who knew that crack, who knew that problem was actually going to make us better, and I think that's this too, that I love that. It woke her up, she was stuck in the culture, and then it's like, whoa, greater purpose. And it took her being freaked out. If I perish, I perish. I can't imagine that she probably felt real calm about saying that.
I mean, that was a very real chance. If I perish,
right.
I perish, I guess. Reality is she was probably, she faced the chance of perishing either way. And it wasn't really a winning situation. If I don't face my husband, I perish. If I face my husband, I might perish. But I love that glow stick story, because for me, it's like sometimes God takes from us those things we think we want and gives them back to us better. And we needed to trust in his timing. But sometimes we're the glow stick. Sometimes he has to break us to make us better. And I think that's a great picture. So I'm just going through some of the stuff that I highlighted. Just understanding one thing that I did. One thing that I did really appreciate is how it talked about Esther as Azer and Esther as partner in the Blessed Alliance. It was not about her and Xerxes.
No,
it was about her and Mordecai.
Yeah,
it was the partnership they had. It was how they challenged each other, how she had gone from being really taken care of her whole life. Mordecai took care of her. Then she entered into Xerxes' place, and he took care of her. She had a sugar daddy all of her life. And now, but then when the Lord breaks her and molds her and makes her glow, now she's going back to Mordecai and saying, all right, here's what I need you to do. You need to fast. You need to tell everyone else to fast. These are the rules. This is how it's going to go. And she turned around and supported him and kept him alive and let him grow like he had always done for her all her life.
Yeah. So two things I think of with that I really appreciated was, one, once she was awake, she took charge. But when she took charge, it was to point people to Jesus. I mean, it doesn't directly say that, but it was like, okay, we have a problem. What do? We're going to fast. We're going to fast. And we're going to pray. But we can't do anything. We can't move until we make that connection. And then we'll move. And so I just really appreciated that. She acted as the spiritual leader of her people, leading them back to God, to acknowledge their dependence on him. And that's how she approached the problem. And I think that's a great lesson for us to take too.
Esther, with her courage, cunning, ingenuity, and diplomacy, a woman in a world that was not only ruled by men, but devalued women, is the main agent in effecting the Jews' deliverance. Just how God so regularly takes expectations, takes cultural stigma, and turns it on its head to show us, you may think you got it. You don't got it. You don't got it. The fact that he used not only a woman, but a passive pretty girl. I don't know. I appreciated that.
Yeah.
And then again, that the Azer not being just in marriage, that really,
that's
that
a
really
big one
helped
too
me as well. I'm just going through here, seeing if there's anything else I want to touch, and then we can, I think we touched that. So let's jump to the questions in the back of this chapter.
Yeah.
Were there any that jumped out to you before we move on?
Well, I think we hit on the number 3, that was one that kind of really stood out to me, that I kind of pondered for just a while, that how did Esther embrace her culture's view of her, and how did it hurt her? Well, obviously, it was because it just defined her by her beauty and nothing more. And I think that just stunted her in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. I like question 8. How does Esther's story show us that God values and works through us to advance his kingdom today? How is she a role model for us? I mean, she has a book in the Bible named after her. We're just like, okay, sure. Like, she's a hero. But to like really understand, this is a woman that valued herself because others valued her based on her looks. Like that was her identity. And God gave her that. And that is a valuable gift and a valid gift. She shouldn't shirk that. She shouldn't not be thankful that she was beautiful, but that is never going to be enough. And that God takes all of us, and if we are willing, calls us to greater things and allows us to do hard things. And he will use even the most unlikely candidates to shake the world. And I always appreciated the line in Esther where it talks about, a poor summarizing of it, but like, look, if you don't act here, like if you don't do this, someone else will. Like, God's not going to let his people perish. You have an opportunity to join with him in what he's doing. And that it's not like, oh, I guess I'll be a martyr and I guess I'll do it. It's like, no, you have an opportunity to be blessed through this, because if not you, someone else.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Little Mother Mary is the next chapter.
Oh, Mary.
I appreciated how a lot of the focus on this chapter of Mary was Mary for her youth. Because I think when we think of Mary, we think of a mother, we think of someone, middle-aged, but the reality was she was 13 or 14 when she was told she was going to be a mama.
That's crazy.
And just how willing and obedient she was willing to be for her youth. So that was a different take on Mary. What are some of your thoughts on this chapter?
Yeah, I mean, immediately that is one thing that stood out to me. And I loved how the author was like saying, we rarely think to look to the local high schools for, like faith leaders or like faith warriors kind of. And it's true. When I think about it, I actually do know a few ladies that are in high school or younger, our younger age, that I kind of look up to. I'm like, wow, you have great knowledge, you have great, faith, you have just chutzpah, for the Lord, like it's amazing. So I really appreciated that. I loved how. Oh wait, I can't go any further without saying I loved that they left Jesus. And it took like 3 days to get him. It made me feel so much better as a parent. Like, all right, Jesus was left behind too. It's totally fine.
I've always read that. And I was like, but how? How do you not realize you know your kids? Which, of course, it's just because I have not yet left a kid at a grocery store. And I'm sure it's going to happen one day. I have 4 of them. There's a lot more to keep track of now. But I'm always like, but how does that happen? And I so appreciated that this woman has done so much more homework than I have to explain that he was 12. That's a transitionary age. He was able to decide, do I travel with my dad or do I travel with my mom? And so they both thought that. So it actually allowed me to show them a little bit more grace, because I can be super judgy, and I'm learning that about myself.
Yeah. So for the record, I haven't actually left my child somewhere, but my husband did drop off our middle daughter at drum lessons once at this church. That she always has it. It was the same time that they always have it, but apparently somehow we missed the memo. He didn't walk in with her. He just dropped her off and she walked in. No. He came back after, and thankfully there was like a church bazaar there. So she was like cozied up to the lady taking the money, and they had given her like candy and something else. And we're like, we are the worst parents. It's like, no, even Mary, had a mishap. So that felt good for parenting. Even Jesus's mom isn't perfect. It's cool.
And there are a lot of people who would be super offended that you just said that, because for some people, Mary is like just this paragon of perfection and is right up there with Christ. And that wasn't the church tradition that I was raised in. But I appreciate how this points out, like, wow, look at this really faithful youth, but look at how she got lost. in her identity and how her identity was shaken. And again, a lot of cultural clues that I don't think we really appreciated, just like in Esther. So here it says her pregnancy wounded the people she loved best.
Yeah.
And jeopardized her reputation and even her safety. Like an unwanted pregnancy today, for some families, that still carries like such weighty risk, and there's a lot of ugliness around that. Kids being kicked out of the house, etc. I am the daughter of what was an unwed woman. I was born when she was 18. You know, I was due on her 19th birthday. I was a month premature. And, you know, I'm very grateful that my grandparents did not have that view of things. But the stakes were so much higher for Mary in this age. And one other thing that really stuck out to me in addition to the stakes and what she was agreeing to was that she wasn't just chosen to bear Jesus, the Son of God, the Savior of the world. She was chosen to raise him. And at 14 years old, she was teaching and building a spiritual foundation in many ways. She taught him how to pray. She taught him how to, you know, follow the traditions of their people at 14. What were you doing at 14, Nikki?
Not that.
No.
I was probably listening to a boy band somewhere and putting a scrunchie in my hair or something.
Like, just to think of the magnitude of her calling, that I don't know that I ever took it that far to understand like what it is to raise children now. You have several kids. I have several kids. And the weight I feel, the responsibility I feel as a mother to get them on the right path. Yeah. And she was called as a child herself in many ways to raise the Savior of the world. I mean, that's weighty.
And to know that going in, like it's not even like, oh wow, I didn't realize he's doing great things. That's great. No, like to know that here you are raising the Savior of the world. Like what kind of pressure that would be. Holy man, yeah.
But what kind of honor? And that's another thing they talk about in this is like when she agreed to that. I mean, even in her initial response, she says, you know, everyone will call me blessed. She was expecting that. Yeah, I'm raising the Savior of the world. Like as a 14-year-old, I don't think she expected it to be the road that it ended up being. I actually underlined, and I'm like, excuse me, where it said her son turned out to be more of a challenge than she ever expected. I'm like, how dare you? You're talking about Jesus. But the reality was raising the Savior of the world was not easy. Like, and I think, you know, she ended up finding out just how the world was going to be against her son. And it was a challenge not for anything he did, but just like with Mrs. Noah. And it said, it's hard to be married to a faithful man in a world of unfaithful men. And it is hard to be the mother of a Savior when the world is inevitably going to reject him. Yeah. So the my computer didn't die, but the screen went dark. So I'm going to kill time while I try to open it again. And I got the wrong password because I want to read the second question. Okay, here it is. Oh, I lost it again. Oh, technology. Okay. When has... it went away again. Okay. Where is it? Thank you so much for joining us on this journey, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, when has God rocked the foundations of where you once placed your identity?
Well, the first thing that I thought of, honestly, like the first rocking of my foundation, I think was when my parents got divorced. I was in high school, and you just think, I mean, I guess you don't necessarily think that your identity is found in your family. Like you're not thinking about that at that young age. I was 15 when my parents got divorced, but when they did, suddenly, everything was different, and I didn't know things like, who do I live with, who do I belong to, kinda, and my life that I thought was the life that I had is no longer, and so it was like, oh my, okay, so who am I? Who are they? Who is life now? And I think that was my very first recollection of truly being like rocked and not knowing which direction to go and not knowing what life was or who I was in it.
Yeah, my parents are not divorced. I didn't experience that personally, but I hear that a lot, and I can't imagine what it must have been like. And unfortunately, it's more common than not these days to see the home ripped apart and to see children floundering to figure out, okay, where's my place in the world now? For me, before I came to the Lord, I most identified with being an actress. And I never did anything crazy. Like I was never in some Hollywood, blockbuster or anything like that. But it was what I loved to do. And when I became a believer, the trajectory of my life changed. And that was one of the things that I had to be willing to place on the altar. Now, God surprised me in that He actually didn't ask me to give it up. He just transformed it. I led some drama ministries when I was in college and was able to use creative storytelling for His glory, which was really different. But shaking myself out of that identity, those circles that I ran in, when I became saved, I gained so much, but I lost so much. And for me, I didn't get saved until I was 22. And so I was in this place where I was truly discovering who I was as an adult, and I gave up a lot. But again, I would never look back. There was so much more that I found, and my identity is so much stronger now than it ever was before. I feel like I do finally know myself. But for Mary, it talks about how she identified as the Blessed Mother. And for many of us, that's how we see her now as well. But again, culturally, when Joseph died and she was a widow, and then when her son was crucified as a criminal, I mean, that identity she would have made for herself came crashing down. But it just revealed that her identity was never meant to be as the Blessed Mother.
Yeah.
It was meant to be as Jesus's first disciple.
Yep.
And I love the line. Where is it? Oh, my Lanta. I gotta find it. Okay. Her greatest calling was to follow Jesus and cultivate the family resemblance by becoming like her son. Like that is countercultural. Like, you look up to and strive to become like your son in a culture where it was very much the opposite.
Yeah. I really appreciated how she kind of followed Mary's journey as a mom, and some of the roadblocks, like we said, that she was coming into, like just the changing of Jesus's role in her life, and all in the before that, all the judgment that was possible and things. It made her more real to me. Like it made her more of a real person and not just someone on a piece of stained glass. You know what I mean? And I think that they actually had put it well here, and I don't think it's just teenagers, but it says she offers teenage girls today a stronger role model than some of the alternatives that beckon them. But she became even more of a role model for me, and maybe it's because I am a mom. It's just knowing the sacrifices that she had to make for God through through being a mother, and how hard that would have had to be, and yet how much of an honor it was for her, and how at the end, she was called blessed, but it was a long journey. It was a long journey for her. And so I also loved how they talked about Joseph.
Yes.
And oh my word. Oh, what a sweet just portrayal of him that I hadn't honestly thought about either.
I love Joseph, and I've always loved Joseph for a different reason than the way I love him today. So I always loved Joseph because here was a man who willingly took on the child of another.
Yep.
Of another. And that was what my dad did for my mom. He married her, but legally adopted me. So if we ever play Two Truths and a Lie, I am half adopted. That's one of my things I say, which was always great. But I appreciate Joseph today because I married a Joseph. And I love the comparison they made to Mrs. Noah. Is here, as far as, we see things, especially through a modern lens, Mary was called. Mary's the star. Mary is the most revered woman in Scripture, bar none. And here is Joseph understanding the call his wife was given and willingly traveling along. Now, I don't know what Joseph was like as a man. Maybe he was very strong. Maybe he was a leader in the community. Maybe for all of his strengths, he was revered. I don't know what it was like. Or maybe he was the servant. And maybe he was one willing to sacrifice and give for his family to support his wife's ministry and what she was called to do. And that is what my husband does. He's gotten used to, in some circles, being Summer's husband, and
sure.
And he doesn't resent that. And it's created some challenges. I know that I've mentioned this before because we've kind of struggled with those roles. And again, feeling like, oh, well, he's following me or I'm the stronger one or whatever. But the strength that he has in his willingness to support his family. And there was one line I really highlighted in here that says, what a refreshing message we as Christians could send to a gender-embattled world if men and women in the church partnered together as selflessly as these two did for the sake of Christ.
Yes.
Like he didn't need to be the star of the show.
Right.
And it just caused me to just pause and thank God for my marriage and just realize the Lord gave me a Joseph and I appreciate him so much more. So, yeah.
I love that just so much. It's just such a great example, too, of a blessed alliance. I think there have been times where, we've talked about women and how they kind of supported the man and things like that. But this was I'm sure that Mary supported Joseph, but the way that it is in this chapter is really just listen, Joseph really held her up and helped her and did that. But it's, and to each their own season, too, I'm sure. Because early on, she needed more help than maybe a little bit later. But man, what a cool portrayal. And I really do hope that, I really do hope that message goes beyond just this book too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a heart that I have for so many people to hear and for so many men to hear.
Yeah.
But there is that is strength. And that is
strength.
Yeah, I love it so much. And one of the other takeaways from this chapter that I really appreciated is the reminder, first of all, again, just like looks, when we base our identity on who we are as mothers and wives, how shaky of a foundation that can be. Yes. Because when you base everything on the fact that you have children or that you are married or that your children are successful, all of that can be taken away from you. But that the kingdom of God is not biological, but spiritual. Jesus's family isn't built on bloodlines, biology, or genetics, but on a shared commitment to God and his word. And that there is a calling, there is value, there is purpose, even for those women who never have children, who either can't or choose not to, who are married or who aren't, by choice or not. It does not in any way diminish your value. And I just want to say it again for the ladies in the back. You have so much value. So much. And your primary calling, Mary's primary calling, was to be a disciple of Christ. And that's huge. So jump into the back of the book because I want to see if you had anything else that you wanted to touch on before we wrap up.
Well, that number one truly just made me think of those ladies. Just as a reminder, don't give up on the generation after you. We are called to be disciples of Jesus, which means we're called to also make disciples, and so the teenagers have great capacity, and the younger we can, fill their minds and hearts with Jesus, hopefully the longer they'll be able to pursue that and to do the same. And so that was just something that really stuck out to me there, was that just that good reminder. That's part of our job too.
And I like question number 2. What are the similarities between Blandina, who we visited in the first couple paragraphs, the slave girl who was martyred willingly, and Mary, the young mother of Jesus? Why are these young women strong role models for us? The fact is, both Blandina and Mary stepped forward willingly to martyrdom. Like Mary had no idea how it was going to go for her when she accepted that she was going to be impregnated outside of marriage. Like, and in that time, I mean, that was a risk to her life. And she stepped forward willingly, and her faith didn't falter in circumstances where anyone else's faith may have faltered. And she stepped forward in joy. And I look at that account of the slave girl as well and understanding, well, not understanding truly, but taking in at least some of those horrors that she faced and how she did it with joy and willingness because she knew whatever were to come, the promises of God and his provision are so much greater, even if I don't experience them this side of heaven.
Amen.
Wow. So what a good grouping. And next week we hit Mary Magdalene. Well, not hit her because that'd be rude, but we study Mary Magdalene and the women of Philippi. So, and that's our last grouping, I think. And then we wrap it up. Oh my goodness.
This has gone by so fast, but this is such a good book. I don't think this is the last time I'll read it either.
No, I hope it's been life-giving for all of you listening as well. We'd love, of course, as always, to hear your thoughts. Jump onto the Facebook page. If you're not a part of the Facebook page, it might be because you haven't officially signed up at connectedlifebookclub.com, which is what we would encourage you to do. And of course, subscribe to this podcast. And if you would take a moment and you would actually rate it, whatever you think, it doesn't have to be 5 stars. I mean, we hope that you love it, but it's just going to help other people discover this, which I hope has been life-giving for you, wherever you get your podcasts. Or again, the hub of all the information is connectedlifebookclub.com. Nikki, my beautiful, gorgeous, stinking friend.
Oh my word. Oh goodness.
No, I'm not even just saying that. And if you people go on to our Facebook page, Nikki's done some live videos and you tell me if this woman's not gorgeous. Anyways, as always, a pleasure. I will meet you right back here next week for week 6 as we wrap up this book.
See you soon.
Bye.
Join us next week for more of The Lost Women of the Bible by Carolyn Custis James with Summer Shepherd and Nikki Corbin. Get involved in our Facebook group and sign up for weekly discussion guides when you visit connectedlifebookclub.com today.